Welcome to Down the Warp Pipe. I'm your guy Ty, and this week we're counting down my favorite, my most disappointing, and what I missed this year. So the big thing to remember is this list is just what I've played, what I've been able to get my hands on, and are purely my opinions. There's a lot of stuff in here that's great, and some of it we might totally disagree on. Without further ado, so these are in no particular order. These are just the games that I had the most fun with, and if you haven't had a chance to check out, I would highly recommend checking out. They have that Tyler stamp of approval on them, so to speak. So the beginning of the year obviously was a lot of fun, but then things got really serious with the lockdowns. With that came an amazing game that a lot of people haven't really been talking about as much as I thought they would have, and that is Neo 2. As you can see, this is an amazing game. I've sunk approximately 90 hours myself into it, but I have one friend who's gotten close to 400 hours. I'm sure there's some of you out there that have played it and know what I'm talking about when I say it's incredibly addictive. The best way of describing it, if you haven't checked it out yet, is like a combination of the Souls-like genre in terms of how you progress your levels and gain experience, or in Neo, it's Amrita. But the biggest difference is that the loot system is basically Diablo 2. For the most part, it's exactly what I wish Diablo 4 was going to be. That's just a guess off my head because it looks so similar to Diablo 2 with the perspective. I know that might sound like blasphemy to some people, but for me, Neo 2 was that perfect hit that I haven't had since Diablo 2. Fast action, if you love the Ninja Gaiden games, it's basically a spiritual successor in terms of difficulty, and some awesome hidden Easter eggs in there. If you haven't played the first one yet, you can actually kind of skip it and go directly into the second one, which overall is a much more balanced and fair game, although the first one is fair as well. And with those remasters coming out for PS5, it's a great time to jump into them if you never have checked out the Neo series. They're done by Team Ninja, so you know it's got an amazing, amazing pedigree behind it. That really brings me to another game that has amazing pedigree behind it, which is actually Ghost of Tsushima Legends specifically, or as I like to call it, Ghost Sushi Legends. So I'm specifically singling out the multiplayer component here because that's all I've managed to play so far. I've sunk about 60 to 70 hours into that as of its release, and it's a blast to play. For me, it's the best co-op four-player survival mode or story mode, depending on what you prefer. But it's the best co-op experience that I've had since Gears of War Horde mode came out way back. The story mode is specifically only a two-player affair, whereas the survival mode is up to four. But the big thing with the story mode is it's the easiest way to level up. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a crew together to do the raid yet. We're gearing up one of our friends to get ready for that. So hopefully, hopefully he can join us soon and we can actually get the raids going on, as long as we can get all four of us on at the same time. But regardless of the single player, which again I haven't checked out yet unfortunately, but I've only heard amazing things. The multiplayer alone is worth the price of admission, especially if you grabbed it on sale, or if you're a little patient, you might be able to still get it on sale in the future. From there, it's really just a matter of diving in, getting used to the mechanics, and making sure you get that legendary sword with all four stances. That makes a world of difference. From there, there's obviously a lot more games that I can mention, but the one that I have sunk the most amount of time to in this year is going to be Fall Guys. With the winter update out now, they've kind of hit a nice balance of fun, chaotic, modes I hate, modes I love. I could go over it time and time again with what I love about Fall Guys and what I hate about it, but it's ultimately a great experience, a lot of fun to jump in. You can play it for anywhere between like 10 and 20 minutes or 10 and 20 hours if you really wanted to. With the third season, the level up progress is a lot smoother than it was in season one. It's noticeably less experience points to get to your max level, 22,000 versus, I believe in the first season it was 28,800. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But it definitely is a lot easier, a lot more manageable and possible to get to that level 40 maximum level. And with the added bonus of crown tiers now, that really makes going back to it, even once you've hit level 40, worthwhile. I'm level 39 right now, really close to getting that level 40. Probably going to grab that a little bit later tonight. But another game that's great to jump in for 10 to 15 minutes or 10 to 15 hours is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. There's not really much to be said about this game that hasn't already been said. If you loved the originals, you'll love these games. They've been brought up to modern standards with control schemes from Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 as the default, but you can actually enable either Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 or 2 control schemes in the settings. It allows you to create an authentic or more modern experience depending on what you want, and it really is a blast. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to check out any of the creative parks. Those are amazing experiences from what I've seen online, but I haven't played them myself. The next game is going to be something that is a lot more divisive this year, but I found it to be one of the best experiences from a story perspective, and that was going to be Last of Us Part 2. People can argue back and forth about Abby being too buff or not. I personally don't care. It was a great story, great characters, and brutality is really at the core of it for what you experience throughout the game. It's, for me, a little long in the tooth. It did kind of feel like two games put into one, which is what the director Neil Druckmann had mentioned at the time. And you do definitely get 2 games worth of content in it. I think I would have preferred it to be split up and released as 2 separate games over the course of the PlayStation 4's lifespan, but ultimately that whole package is a phenomenal roller coaster ride, and it is something that you should not miss out on if you haven't checked it out already. Another game that you definitely shouldn't miss out on, especially if you haven't checked it out already, is Demon's Souls, the remake for the PlayStation 5. Obviously, that's going to be a lot less accessible than the other games that I've mentioned here today because you require to have a PlayStation 5 for it, but it's a fantastic experience. If you haven't checked out a Souls game before, it's definitely more welcoming than what you'll find in the Neo series because of the fact that it works on a slower, more relaxed kind of pacing. That's not to say it's an easy game. It's definitely not the easiest, but it's something that you can jump into and experience for the first time if you've never checked out a Souls game and be given more sort of leeway in terms of the healing. You can carry a bunch of things on you. There's a lot of quality of life improvements, being able to send things to the storehouse from the inventory directly. And obviously there's a lot of time, 11 years specifically, of walkthroughs that are out there because it follows the original game so closely. There's obviously a few hidden nuggets that have been uncovered already. I'm sure there's probably some more in there, but I'm not going to be one to find it. I just had a blast blowing through it, playing through, doing some co-op here and there, and then ultimately getting around to finally platinuming the last game here. And it's going to be the platinum trophy of the year for me, which is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Obviously, this is a great game, whether you play it on PlayStation 4 or you play it on PlayStation 5. The increased graphics now that they've done with the patch, with 4K and ray tracing, that's going to be the best way to play it as far as I'm concerned. I platinumed it long before that patch came out. It was one of the first things I did. 14 hours basically straight once I got my PlayStation 5 before I jumped into Demon's Souls. And although it's a shorter experience, you can get through it in about, I'd say about 10 hours to get the first full playthrough through, and then another 4 hours to platinum it. It's absolutely worth it. Every experience is going to be a little bit different here, but that's one that I think I can recommend to everyone out there. If you haven't played the first one, definitely go with the Ultimate version that comes with both the original game and Miles Morales if you're picking it up on PlayStation 5. If not, you have the Game of the Year edition on PlayStation 4 that comes with the original game, and then Miles Morales is a separate game. But I would highly recommend it. One of the best Christmas games that you can play, which I know it's a little past, but we're still in that time of year, and some of you may still have that festive feeling going on. So those are going to be the games that I absolutely loved and highly recommend this year. If I had to pick a all-around best game, there's not really one that stands out substantially over the others here, but based on the amount of time played, it would have to be Fall Guys. So for these games, there's only four of them, but they're games that were disappointing to me this year. They're not necessarily bad games. There's something that can be found to be really good in some of these games, and something that a lot of people clearly still love. But they're ones that weren't quite as good as I was hoping they would be, or in the case of this first one, something that didn't live up to what I was hoping it would have. And it's going to be a controversial one here, but Final Fantasy VII Remake is my disappointment, first disappointment of the year. Coming off the back of Neo 2, I spent like a lot of time playing and was really in that hack and slash movement. I was excited. I'd played the demo for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it had sold me on the game. I was initially a little skeptical, going to wait for a sale maybe, wait for some reviews. But playing the demo, I was like, you know what, this is awesome, this is fun, and I really wanted to check it out. I have a kind of love-hate relationship with Final Fantasy VII. I was a huge Final Fantasy fan before, with 2 and 3 here in the North Americas, but obviously it was a different story, 4 and 6, in terms of the whole chronological order. But 7 came out at a time when I didn't have a PlayStation 1, and eventually got it on PC, played it, and didn't really understand what everyone was so excited about. I still to this day appreciate it for what it is, a great game, but it didn't click with me the same way it clicked with a lot of other people. But for me, it wasn't my first JRPG. It wasn't even my favorite, which to this day is still Chrono Trigger. But with Final Fantasy VII Remake, it was an amazing presentation, which it absolutely still has, but it just disappointed me with how the combat really didn't have a natural flow to it the way that something like Neo 2 does. Now, I understand they're very different games, but the dodge button not actually having a invincibility window in Final Fantasy VII Remake really put a hamper on what I thought was going to be a cool combination of Mass Effect 2, Devil May Cry, and some Final Fantasy sprinkles in there from Final Fantasy 15. I thought it was going to be a really fun and interesting kind of merger of worlds, so to speak. But it ultimately really disappointed me with the big open areas that were empty and you just kind of kept walking through, and eventually you get to these towns and there's lots of broken up small sequences in the towns, which I'm sure will be fixed in the second part of this new series because of the newer hardware and the solid state drives now on the consoles. But ultimately it was something that, although I finished it, I did eventually switch from playing it on the sort of normal difficulties all the way going to the classic difficulty, which made the game a lot more manageable and a lot more fun, actually. So I was able to experience the story and enjoy it for the kind of back third of it where I switched the game mode to that. That's something that I always found really interesting with this, though, is for the people that really loved this game and maybe some people that didn't love it, like myself and some of my friends, it'd be interesting to see what difficulty that these people played it on, at least initially on their first playthrough. I have a feeling that a lot of people that loved it and loved it back in the day, as I mean, I still managed to, though I do have some, like I said, love-hate relationship with it. Just always hated the amount of attention Final Fantasy VII got. I understood it, but hated the amount of attention it got when I felt that 6 and Chrono Trigger were better games. But it ultimately was one of those games that disappointed me this year when I was expecting a whole lot more out of it. It was a little more frustrating than I would have liked, and I won't get too much into it right now, but I'll save that for another video and move on to the next one here, which is the game that I think really would have just kind of been a blip on the radar and missed if it didn't come out at a console launch, and that's Godfall. So with Godfall, it was a game that, coming from the publishing arm of Gearbox, I had kind of high hopes for. Borderlands 3 was great, and I've generally liked the Gearbox games for the most part. Just kind of expecting a melee Borderlands with my friends, being able to collect different gear and items and different armor, which ultimately didn't really happen. I still, after completing the game and running through most of the first wave of Dreamstones in it, which are the end game, have no idea how to get cosmetics whatsoever unless they were included with some of the paid DLC that I prepaid for, unfortunately. It's not a bad game by any stretch, and it's actually pretty fun when you're playing with two other friends, or even one other friend. But it's something that definitely let me down when I was expecting it to be a little more fleshed out, and a little more thought through. Some of the mechanics, like the weapon timing, really just doesn't add up to being more enjoyable. You go to do a specific weapon timing by delaying your button presses, and then you start swinging and you just end up getting hit by another enemy, or you're getting hit the entire time and not interrupted. And it ultimately just kind of turned down to figuring out the best build, which was just using a boring long sword. I wanted to originally use a hammer, and using the weak point system in it, where you kind of like Fortnite, aim at the different weak points in enemies, and using that to kind of stack damage on top of itself and keep going, which worked out really well and it creates this amazing kind of power fantasy. But between all the kind of missteps and sort of half-baked ideas, it really felt like a game that needed another 6 months. Not that it was bad, but had it come out at a time where there's a lot of other games to play, or there wasn't that wanting something new and fresh and bright and pretty to play with your friends on a new console, it definitely would have been missed out. I am hoping, at least, that the game will get many more patches going forward. There's been a recent patch which really changed a lot of the timing and allows for some input buffering now, and it makes a really big difference to the experience. I haven't played it a whole lot now, just with Fall Guys Season 3 and wanting to jump back to some older games during the holidays, but it seems like something that I'll be able to jump back into, especially when that DLC comes out, and it'll be something that's a lot more polished and a lot more presentable. So hopefully it's something that can get salvaged, and I would actually like to see where it goes with a second Godfall game down the road, and see if they're able to really make something that's special. Because this team, it was their first shot, and by all means, not a bad first shot, just wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be. Kind of expecting a little more Diablo meets Demon Souls, but easier kind of feel behind it. Weirdly enough, kind of or almost easy version of Neo 2 is the way I would describe it, that I was hoping for. But that kind of moves us on to two smaller titles that came out this year, which I was personally really excited for. The first one was free on PlayStation Plus. I think it might actually still be there if you're watching this right when it posts, but Worms Rumble. Again, not a bad game. Actually pretty fun. But for me, going back, I was a huge Worms fan back in the day, especially on PC, obviously, where it kind of originated. But going from a turn-based to a real-time mode, I was kind of interested to see what they would do with this. Obviously, going with a battle royale sort of formula, which everyone is doing nowadays. I'm not the biggest fan of those types of games, but obviously it worked with Fall Guys for me. And so I thought Worms could totally do the same thing. Like I said, not a bad game. It's just a little strange to be playing Worms in real time and spawning with either a shotgun, an assault rifle, or a pistol. It really changes up the feel, and honestly makes it weird. I'd rather have a loadout that I can spawn in with and find power weapons around, almost like a Quake or Unreal Tournament game from back in the day, but in Worms form. With the shotgun, you're basically good to go as far as I'm concerned. And the assault rifle's an okay option, and the pistol, I just throw myself at the whims of everyone else when I spawn with it and hope I don't die. It's definitely not a bad game. Parties of only three is a little strange to me. I wish you could invite more people. That seems to be a problem that I'm getting into now with all my friends getting PlayStation 5s, is that we have to think of what game can we possibly play that can include all of us sometimes, because with Godfall you have three, Fall Guys you have four, and the odd game here or there you'll find that has 6 players or 5 players that you can get in a party, but I was really hoping we could get more than that. And the last game that we have here that I'll lead on with is going to be Super Meat Boy Forever, which I was really hoping would be a phenomenal game, but turns out it's an auto runner and it requires incredible precision in order to actually get through the game. And while I was a huge fan of the previous Super Meat Boy game, this one just left a bad taste in my mouth, and I was hoping it would allow for more experimentation when you're playing through the levels, but it really turns out to be a super fast, super precise platformer that just isn't as fun as the original, in my opinion. Again, not bad, has a lot of hard work put into it, but just something that, like the rest of these games, disappointed me this year. All right, so like most of you out there, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but I have a few games, a small list here of 6 that I've managed to not get to this year. Either I haven't touched them at all, or I haven't played them enough to really form an opinion or decide whether I really like them or not, and I just want to dive a little bit more into them. So the first one up here is going to be Ghost of Tsushima's single player mode. Like I mentioned, I've spent about 60 to 80 hours, I think, in the multiplayer portion of the game, but I haven't touched the single player at all. Haven't even done the first initial battle there. Just immediately hit the start button and jump to multiplayer. So I'm really excited to jump into that with the comparisons to Breath of the Wild. I've been diving into that actually recently and finishing up the playthrough that I started back when I picked up my Switch. So I'm going to be really excited to jump into that, hopefully in the first 6 months of the new year, and get a little more experience in that. I'm blown away by the combat. It's a lot of fun, so it's going to be a blast to really get into that and see what the story that Sucker Punch has been building there, and kind of dive into that world, because the combat alone has gotten me just incredibly addicted to it. With the next game, it's one that I actually just picked up for my wife, and we've been just diving into, but have only played a little bit last night, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons. It's been actually really fun to jump in, and although it's not the best co-op experience, with not really having the second player be able to do too much beyond pick up some things that get shot to a box, it's one that I'm excited to play a whole lot more of, and found myself getting already addicted to one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. And I almost couldn't put it down last night to jump into some Fall Guys. So that's definitely a good sign, but I haven't experienced it enough to really form an opinion on it, and I'm excited to play a whole lot more. With the next game on the list here, it's going to be Doom Eternal. I managed to play a good chunk of the original one, but just kind of had some other stuff come up at the time, back when I wasn't quite finishing games and just jumping to the next game a lot. And so I'm really excited to jump into Doom Eternal and play it up. Haven't had a chance to check it out on Game Pass yet. Obviously, it's on there now with the whole Bethesda being potentially acquired by Microsoft. I won't say for sure at this point, but looks like it's going to go through. Um, but the Doom games have always been some that I hold near and dear, some of the first PC games that I played, and I'm excited to jump into Doom Eternal. It's had amazing reviews, amazing recommendations from friends, and just looks like a blast of a first-person shooter to play. With the next one, going to be getting something smaller and something that's a bit of a throwback, but Streets of Rage 4. Recently, finally played through Castle Crashers all the way through with my wife, and it was a blast to play it, and kind of got her sort of playing some games with me that we can kind of play together and have a lot of fun. And I feel like Streets of Rage 4 is going to be one that we'll both really enjoy playing as well. Haven't had a chance to check it out, but it is also on Game Pass, so if you have an Xbox or you have Game Pass on PC, I think it might be on there, but definitely it's on the consoles, and I'd highly recommend checking it out if you haven't jumped into it and want some old school flair. So that's one that I want to check out. And speaking of something I also picked up on Xbox but I haven't had a chance to play yet, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Obviously, there's been a bit of back and forth. It looks like it runs a little bit better on the PlayStation 5, but I just had to have something physical for my Xbox when I picked it up because there really wasn't a Halo or anything like that that I could pick up with it. But that I'm excited to jump into. I originally wanted to jump into it around the holidays, but with jumping into Breath of the Wild and getting sucked into that game, mixed with having Fall Guys as sort of the multiplayer experience, I really haven't had the time to jump into it that I would like. But I'm a huge history buff and fan of specifically the Viking era and area of history, so it'll be really exciting to play through it. With the Viking series wrapping up, I haven't had a chance due to COVID to watch it with my friend that I usually watch Vikings with, so kind of we're waiting for COVID to be over so we can catch up on the 6th season, all of it with that, but hopefully that'll tide me over until then. And that leads us to the very last game that I picked up and have played a little bit, but haven't gotten fully into, which is Sackboy: A Big Adventure. It's almost like a mix of the Mario 3D Worlds game mixed with a Little Big Planet kind of collectathon, outfit your character, dress them up, but without the kind of creativity portion of Little Big Planet. It's a lot of fun so far and definitely has that addictive quality where you want to find everything in the levels. But so far, only beat one world in it. It's been pretty fun here and there, but like I said, not enough to really form an opinion on it, and just want to check it out a whole lot more. It's kind of one of those more casual pick up and play sort of games, and with the recent update to come out and allow online multiplayer, that's something I could see definitely jumping into like some 4-player matches online with and enjoying. But with that said, that's going to be the year 2020 wrapped up here. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this if you want. And I'll be back next week with some new content, some new ways of pushing the channel, and hopefully it'll be something that you're interested in seeing, and we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again, and don't forget to sub, like, and share. Have a great one. Next game's Tuesday. We'll be here.